Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler. Today, I'm cleaning out my closet and making sure that nobody steals my love letters while we discuss the 2018 Netflix hit, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Quite a title there, but this is the first movie on the 50 Best Rom-Coms list that we've covered that did not release in theaters. It comes in at number 49 and is one of the more modern selections on this list. It's fair to say that this movie was made for a younger generation, so I'm glad to welcome back returning guest Cameron Olbert and to give me a different perspective. I didn't quite know what. Well, first off, how are you, Cameron?
I am well. It is 10:07 where I live, so I've had a full day of reading about the civil war in Ethiopia for my final exam. So I'm delighted to talk about something slightly happier or lighter.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a different subject matter. So, I didn't know what generation to pinpoint you in. Are you you're not millennial, right? Are you younger than that?
I am very much culturally Generation Z.
Okay.
Sort of the vanguard of Gen Z, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, just a little background on this movie before I think you'll bring some good perspective to that and maybe how this movie speaks to your generation. But To All the Boys I've Loved Before came out in 2018. It's an American teen romantic comedy film directed by Susan Johnson and is written by Sofia Alvarez. The film stars Lana Condor and Noah Centineo and is based on Jenny Han's 2014 novel of the same name. It was released by Netflix on August 17th of 2018. It's the first installment of the series, and it was followed by two sequels to All the Boys P.S. I Still Love You, released on February 12th, 2020, and then To All the Boys Always and Forever on February 12th, 2021. This is a good time to cover the movie because Netflix is actually releasing a television series, XO Kitty, which is set to premiere on May 18th. So instead of the movie, it's going to be a spinoff series created by Jenny Han, who wrote the original novel. And it marks this as the first time Netflix has made a television series based off of one of its original films. So Han is serving as the writer and executive producer in addition to being a showrunner. It'll feature Kitty Covey going on her own journey to find true love, who is the younger sister in this movie, and is going to be played by the same actress. You had mentioned this movie, Cameron, one, because you're in university in Scotland, and the main character's older sister goes off to Scotland. But
Yes.
Had you seen the movie before that tie-in?
I had, yes. My friend Dora, who also goes to college in Scotland, whom I also met through Youth in Government, showed this to me in 2020. And so we became slightly obsessed with this movie together because we were both applying to university in Scotland. So it was a delightful rewatch after about 3 years of it would always sort of pop up in the back of my mind on occasion for the silliest of reasons. And so I was delighted to sit back down and rewatch it again and think, oh dear, this is an interesting movie.
So when you say obsessed, what does that mean exactly? Like, at that time when it came out, did you watch it more than one time?
No, I don't believe I did. It was just that she and I would just immediately start making references to the movie left, right, and center. And Noah Centineo on his Instagram, he went slightly silly in the aftermath of this movie. He would post, I don't know if you've heard of like the Live Laugh Love memes or whatever.
That does sound somewhat familiar.
He would post that type of stuff on his Instagram for a while, and we just ate that up.
Did you watch the sequels of these movies?
We actually did watch the sequel. We watched the first one. I don't recall if Dora and I watched it together or not, but yes, I watched the sequel once, which was about my favorite character of the movie, John Ambrose. And then as a joke, Dora bought me all three of the original books. And I don't recall if I still have those or not, but yes.
Well, I definitely watched this movie when it came out because I remember it kind of got it definitely garnered some buzz for whatever reason. And I looked back, I hadn't written a review, but I was was favorable when it originally came out, like my kind of little diary entry that I do on Letterbox. And so anyway, I would say the second time for me, but honestly, watching it the second time was almost like the first time. I know between 2023 and 2018 is not that much time, but I guess it was enough time for me to not remember a whole lot about this movie. And so,
Oh yeah.
but I'll say I enjoyed this movie very much. Now that said, I I think maybe it's not. I don't think it's a spectacular movie, but
Yes.
but it's also not trying to be that. It's a pretty grounded film, and I mean this in a good way, actually, a simple film. Would you agree with that?
Yes, so I was going around with my friends in the pubs and such earlier this week saying, oh yeah, I'm going to go on this podcast and talk about To All the Boys I've Loved Before. And all my friends would be like, that movie is so cringy. And I would say, yes, that's the idea. I think two words I would use to describe this movie are delightfully cringy in many ways, in ways that I make it, in my opinion, a rather fun watch. It's a little bit of a
Okay.
comfort movie, I think.
Yeah. But when you say cringy, what do you? Why do you? Why use that word?
Oh, there's just some scenes in that movie where I would watch it and think, oh my, I am feeling secondhand embarrassment. Like in the entire climax scene where there's the confrontation at Christmas when Laura Jean's sister returns and she's having that confrontation with Noah Centineo outside, and then Josh walks up right as the older sister walks outside, and there's just a massive misunderstanding, and the pure secondhand the suffering that I went through rewatching that scene was.
I really like Laura Jean's character because you don't see many characters like her. Even though this plot is kind of maybe not quite what would really happen in real life, but I think her character is someone you would come across quite often, someone who's more quiet, who's more reserved. And so I think it pays off in those cringy scenes because her character is almost so grounded in reality that when those moments happen, it kind of adds an extra layer that
Oh yeah,
you're not. Yeah.
it's very believable. It's sometimes things just happen to Laura Jean, and she does it. The actress does an extraordinary job of portraying the, oh God, how did it come to this? That I think is a centerpiece of a lot of the drama of this movie.
Yeah. So you said the sequel, it focuses on the Josh character. Is that what you said?
No, it focuses on John Ambrose, the by far the greatest boy that she has ever loved before. And I have my
Oh,
reasons
okay.
I'm proud to delve into that.
Okay. So which one is that as far as the letters go?
John Ambrose is the character who she met at Model UN in fifth grade. And as the newly elected president of Edinburgh University Model United Nations, I will declare that it is a crime that John Ambrose features in only the briefest of cameos in this movie. Yet it is one of the cameos in this movie.
So he's the one that shows up at the very end of the credits.
Yeah, he's the one that shows up at the very end of the front door with the flowers and the whatever, and she just like slams the door in his face.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, no, like I mentioned, it's like it's a movie in some regards. The five love letters obviously is the catalyst that gets the whole thing going, but they quickly kind of do that and then just get into the story and the relationships of it all. So even though the letters are kind of a little gimmicky, they really don't focus it on those that much. And so that's one thing that I liked about it. I think there's a couple of scenes throughout the whole movie that kind of seem out of place than the rest because they're trying to kind of fill in some plot points. The scene I'm thinking of towards the end is when she discovers that her younger sister is the one that sent the letters out, and they just have this weird fight that seems more like it came from a sitcom from Nickelodeon than it did the movie.
Yeah.
But it's something that has to be resolved. But I felt like all the other in between moments are I think pretty captivating and pretty sincere. But it kind of reminded me, I don't know, did you ever see the movie from the 90s, She's All That?
Nathan, something you're going to learn about me is that I've seen very few movies that most other people have seen. My girlfriend will attest to this. So I'm afraid I have not seen She's All That.
Okay, well, basically, Freddie Prinze Jr. is in that movie, and then the main girl character in that, and other movies have made fun of this premise because she's like this artsy girl that like wears glasses, and it's like when she takes the glasses off, all of a sudden she's like this like beautiful wonder, And to me,
That's wonderful.
this movie kind of almost made me think of that. I mean, Laura Jean doesn't really change anything about herself, which I like in this movie, but it
Yeah.
is kind of one of those like, oh, now the popular boy sees her for who she really is. It kind of has a similar concept to that. But
This movie embraces a great deal of the sort of archetypes or tropes of rom-coms, in particular of teenage rom-coms, in a somewhat loving way, though, which I do appreciate.
yeah, it also has a running narrative. I've noticed in a lot of these rom-coms that we've been watching that most of them usually reference another rom-com in some way or another, and this one references 16 Candles. I think one thing that it does well in this movie is that I mean, even though Peter gets the main spotlight, I mean, it's really about him and Laura Jean. And I feel like, Josh is kind of in and out a little bit.
Mm.
But I think they did a good job of like, you do. I mean, I guess I'll ask you. I mean, I thought that you end up liking Peter. Like you can see why Laura Jean starts falling for him. I couldn't
Mm.
help but think that Josh kind of gets the short end of the stick a little bit. But is that a great debate that happens around this movie?
Oh yeah, I mean Peter becomes rather a himbo character, to borrow a youth term. Very a bit dumb but respectful of women at the end of the day, which is the essence of himbo-ness. Yeah, Josh as a character is rather underdeveloped, given his like long history with Lara Jean and being friends with her before he then started dating her older sister, which has to have been an awkward arrangement in and of itself. But it would have been perhaps a little bit interesting to see a bit more of him. Like, I don't even recall if he goes to school with her or not. I think he does, but I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, I guess he does. He should. You see him in the distance in the hallways, and he even made reference at the end when Peter like calls out that photograph that's on her locker. He was
Yeah.
like, "Well, that was cool that he did that." But I like the little rivalry that's between them, even
Mm.
though they don't interact very much on a daily basis. That's very much, I think, kind of a guy thing of just like, I just really don't like that guy, but you just don't interact with that guy at all. But I like how he just hates him almost just because.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that as well.
It's not doing anything like crazy new. I mean, there's always been a lot of these movies, even though I never read the books or saw the movies, but like something like Twilight, where the girl is forced to choose between two guys. It
Mm.
reminds me, we watched a Amazon series, I think also based on a YA novel, The Summer I Turned Pretty. And it's very much very similar. It's like you have this main character who was like used to be the quiet girl and she's popular all of a sudden, and she basically chooses between these two brothers that are like polar opposites. This is this is something that comes up a lot in
Huh.
rom-coms and stuff like that, but it's always intriguing for whatever reason. So
Yeah.
did Laura Jean's father look familiar to you at all, John Corbett?
You know what? Slightly, yes. There was a vague something ringing in my bell, ringing in the ears there, but I couldn't tell you exactly what it was that was ringing in my ears.
Yeah, so been in lots of stuff. It's funny, we've been watching the sitcom on Hulu, How I Met Your Father, and he just did a guest appearance on there. But he's in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I think he was
Ooh,
also a big character in Sex
okay.
and the City and stuff. But I just had to throw out there that I enjoyed seeing him. He's never somebody who really like deviates from his personality very much, but he's just a solid character. He just kind of reins everything in.
Sex in the City, or not Sex, My Big Fat Greek Wedding is the reference point that I had for him. I remember now. My mother showed me that movie a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing I liked about this movie, I thought it had very genuine moments of dialogue. I thought, especially for a quote unquote teen movie, usually you feel like we just recently watched 10 Things I Hate About You, and that's a movie that like really moves. It's like going all the time. And I feel like this movie actually succeeds because it kind of rests in these moments, even when Laura Jean and Peter are like working on the contract, those type of scenes. But was that something that you picked up on at all?
Yeah, in particular, I enjoyed the moments of Laura Jean and, at least in one scene, Peter reflecting on their parents and on the underlying sort of theme of losing a parent. For a teen movie, that's a rather strong emotional subject to try to tackle. And the fact that they're able to, it shows these characters connecting around that shared experience is something I got to give this movie props for. And then also talking to Laura Jean in the diner, talking to her dad about missing her mom, and her dad opening up and sharing about when they were dating, because we don't, when you're a kid, you don't necessarily get a lot of. I still don't know a lot of like how my parents like courtship went. So those rather tender moments of connection, I think, were an interesting and beneficial addition to the movie that I really appreciated.
Yeah. No.
Again, I like really heavy movies. I mean, I want to talk about All Quiet on the Western Front with you at some point. So
Yeah, once again, a completely different subject matter. I feel like I didn't look up necessarily like what the budget was for this movie or that sort of thing, but it's also a movie you can very much tell it had to rest its laurels on just the story and the dialogue and the characters, because it's not necessarily that something that seems like a extremely high budget type of movie. I even thought about when they go on the ski trip. It's just kind of funny. Like we usually it was something higher budgeted. I think you would see like kids skiing and all this kind of stuff. We don't ever see that. They're
yeah.
pretty much just at that cabin, the whole time. So
Yeah, they're just in a ski lodge, which, by the way, I had completely forgotten about that entire sequence. And I appreciate as well that it just happens entirely within the confines of that lodge, which I also was wondering in my head sequentially, when in the year are they doing this? Because I was following the movie. I suppose it was in like early January before they went back to school, but like just barely before they went back to school. I was trying to like put together a timeline in my head throughout the entire movie, but that's a separate discussion perhaps.
I know this movie had the title cards, to kind of designate these, this time and everything. And I guess especially when her sister kind of returns and with Christmas and that sort of thing. But I did get a little lost in that. Sometimes you can see big designations of the weather outside to, kind of place such things. But in this one, I don't know why. Yeah, I wasn't quite as concerned as the time frame of everything. So one thing I think that just hits on me when I watch kind of more modern rom-coms like this, and certainly when it comes to like bullying and that sort of thing, is always the presence of camera. So they take this picture of her and Peter in the hot tub or whatever. And man, I just have to say, like, for your generation, I mean, I'm just glad that's not something I had to ever worry about as a as a teen, of like video recordings being out there.
Yeah. I mean, growing up myself, I dated outside of my high school class pretty much exclusively. So I never was necessarily worried about that sort of thing happening, nor did I ever really know of that happening to anyone. I mean, I know that sort of thing does happen. I can't say that, at least in my time in high school, that was a major like concern or worry. In my high school, people tended to keep, mind their own business, and it was a rather cosmopolitan kumbaya environment. But I mean, keeping like the whole digital privacy thing is something that is in the forefront of a lot of our minds, and I can go more into that. But it's sort of I don't know that it's even necessarily a conscious thing. It's just sort of routinized in the way that we sort of think about these sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, I like how I feel like even though she is kind of set up as the villain, was it Jen? Yeah, Jen was the girl, like Peter's like girlfriend slash ex-girlfriend or whatever, this kind of hatred that she had. But even though she's kind of the villain and you kind of don't like her, I like how at the end they show the motivation behind her actions, that she was holding on to this kiss that happened in junior high between
Yeah.
the two, and that and it's just as funny because once again I keep referencing the last podcast we did, but 10 Things I Hated About You. On that, Tara talked about how girls like just never forget when somebody does them wrong or whatever. And that's that in this moment I was like, hey, yeah, this totally backs up Tara's comments, because this girl was hanging on to this moment since junior
Yeah.
high. I like that the fact that even in that moment Laura Jean can see a different perspective, and we're always the heroes of our own stories, right? And so I like for as broad as that character was, that they still kind of gave time to give her some, kind of, I guess she still, posted that photo or whatever, but, still gave her like a little kind of made her more human, not just as cardboard.
Yeah. No, it's, I appreciated in that scene, them showing Jen opening up and saying, I'm not as strong or as hard as people think I am on the outside. And Peter, yes, I just call him Noah, since Noah is not as suave as he seems or whatever. The cinematography in that scene also was quite interesting as well. Actually, was something that I noticed. But yeah, no, I appreciated them giving a bit of depth to Jen in what would otherwise have been a rather one-dimensional sort of teenage villain character. I thought that was rather cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. So why do you think, so there was obviously this was a successful series, and why do you think like this became such a hit? Because I mean, I do think it's a good movie. I still wouldn't, I almost want to say maybe it came out like Netflix was really hitting its stride in 2018. Maybe it was like came out at the right time, at the right moment. Because I don't see like a movie like this necessarily succeeding in the movie theaters.
Yeah. So approximately 10 minutes before we started this podcast, I was talking to Bobble, and the conclusion that we came to about this movie, or Barbara, my flatmate, and the conclusion that we came to is this movie is good because it's camp. This
Okay.
movie is
Yeah.
every way. Like the iconic scene for me is the hot tub scene where when Laura Jean is speaking to Peter, and the camera is placed just so that you can see Noah Centineo's remarkable pectoral muscles, such that you're like, oh my god, he's so hot. I want to come into the hot tub with him. Like, that is the essence of camp. Like, that is one of the reasons why I think this movie is a hit. It's why myself and Dora were so obsessed with it for a while. Is because it knows what it is. It embraces the tropes. It doesn't necessarily break new ground, but it's not trying to. And yet it takes a novel concept of these letters got mailed, and they were never meant to be mailed, but here they are, and now I have to cringe my way through watching the problem get fixed. And I fell in love along the way. Is
Yeah.
that not
Yeah.
the campy teenage rom-com, Nathan?
I know. Very much so. Were there any quotes that stood out to you from this movie?
I struggle to say quotes necessary, or almost very nearly almost X'd out of the Google call there. That would have been hilarious. No, I struggle to say that there were quotes. However, I noticed that people kept, especially the guys, kept referring to other guys by their last name, which I did that in Youth and Government because there was another Cameron, and so he was Pennington and I was Olbert. But I have never really done that, like, in my everyday life. I did not really do that in my everyday life in like high school and such. It was something that I noticed, however. And I was thinking, this is one of those moments that you can kind of tell that the movie was not necessarily written exclusively by high schoolers. How about you,
Yeah.
Nathan?
Oh, well, I think this might have been and this makes me sound like super bro-y, which I'm not, but in my fraternity, it was very much a thing where people called each other by the last name. So
Okay.
anyway, so it was very like in college, it would not be uncommon for a lot of people to say, "Hey, Chandler." So I think it works too that Chandler is also a common first name as well.
Mm.
So anyway, I always jokingly say I have three first names. I have my full name's Nathan Ross Chandler, but I also
Mm.
say that's why Whitney married me, because she's a huge Friends fan, and the fact that I had both Ross and Chandler in my name was a great upside.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So yeah. In college, for whatever reason, it was like always Chandler. A lot of people call me Nate, or Nathan. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny. I think maybe more when you get to the kind of like more macho type of areas, maybe with like athletics or something where it's like fraternities and stuff. Maybe that's where you get a lot of those last names. Yeah.
I've got friends on the Edinburgh University women's rugby team. And there's this one American girl there who her first name is Charlotte, but they all call her Cody. And we were watching a rugby game, and I turned and asked, "Why do you all call her, Cody?" And they were like, "Because you can't yell Charlotte across a rugby pitch." And I was like, "Oh, fair enough."
Yeah. That totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
This thing is definitely not the most quotable movie, but I did have, I think it was towards the end, but Josh tells Laura Jean, "You've got to tell people how you feel when you feel it." And I liked that sentiment a lot. So,
Good.
yeah, most rom-coms are always like, "Hey, I'm gonna," some kind of proclamation of like how you feel or whatever like that. But in that moment, it's even, I liked how they built up, that he kept trying to like talk to her, and there's even a moment where Laura Jean says, "Hey, let's talk about it. Don't just say whatever," or like, "It's okay if we don't talk about it now." But I like how this movie is like, things are a lot better said than unsaid. So I like that sentiment about it.
I appreciate
Um,
that sentiment too. Now that I think about it, there were two quotes that stood out to me. Not quite as serious as you were describing, or certainly not as in depth. However, um, Laura Jean references James Dean, I think, at one point, and Peter goes, "You have the references of an 80-year-old woman." And the fact that it just came out like a snap was like, that is like Aaron Sorkin type dialogue. I would expect to see that on The West Wing, and yet here I am watching All the Boys I've Loved Before, hearing that, which I strongly appreciated. And then on top of that, there's also and this is going back a little bit to the cringe point that I had, which is that when you take a step back and think about the situation that you're in, Lara Jean, after the video gets put on like Instagram, says, "I can't believe I was in a pornographic video having never had sex before."
Yeah, no, those are funny. Yeah, I liked how they framed her character as kind of being a little bit like an older soul, and
Yeah.
I did laugh at the moment too of the hand, the hand in the back pocket of the jeans or whatever like that. So because I remember in high school a couple, like, it was like the odd couples that would kind of do that, and for some reason it was always a little strange to me.
That's unheard of for me. I had never heard of that concept. I saw someone doing that in like the student union of my university. I'd be like, "What in God's name is going on here?"
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that as a first move in any kind of relationship. Instead of holding hands, could I place my hand in your back pocket? You mentioned the hot tub scene, which I like. As you get older, it gets a little weirder to watch such scenes. I'll say, as I'm getting, I guess, like as I'm getting the same age as the dads in these movies and stuff. So those moments of like, these are high schoolers that were like watching make out or whatever. I know this is a movie maybe made more like for teens or whatever like that. But all that said, I feel like they did a good job of setting up that scene and that connection with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that definitely was not my favorite scene. Mine were in particular the two cafe scenes. One with her and Peter initially talking, and then when it comes back and she's in the same cafe with her dad, and her dad's telling her a little bit about her mom and stuff. Those were the two that really stuck out in my head. Were there any other scenes that you liked?
Those two scenes are extraordinary. I enjoy the parallel, honestly, between her, sort of rather awkward interaction with Peter that ends with Peter driving her home, and then her talking about the sort of early courtship of her dad and her mother. Regarding other scenes, of course, the hot tub scene, I appreciate it for its cringe. The scenes, and this is selfish because this is my connection to the movie. All of the scenes with her older sister, in particular, talking about Scotland, I found to be very, very good fun. Just as a extraordinarily personal connection to the movie. She mentions that when we go to pubs, the Scottish girls wear short skirts and whatever. And I was thinking to myself, no, they don't do that. But I totally see how you would tell your younger sisters that happens because you want them to think you're cool.
Also in the movie, I had it written down. Did she mention at one point she says you're a good crack?
Yeah, she does. I've never heard anyone say it in that context. I've heard people say good shout. Oh, that's a good shout. You're a good shout. I've also heard you're a good egg. I've been called a good egg. But I've never been called a good crack. No.
Yeah. And I'm assuming when somebody's calling you a good egg, that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, no, I was intentionally screwing up British slang, and my friend's boyfriend was like, "Cameron, you're a good egg. I love you," and I felt very good, very very good inside.
Yeah, and I thought also probably good. Probably some people's favorite scenes might be at the beginning, the track scene where she basically mauls Peter because she doesn't know what else to do in front of Josh and all that
scene. Yes. That's a good scene. Going back to the cringy aspect of this movie, but when you're 16 and you have no idea what to do because your reality has come crashing down because this very private part of you has suddenly been exposed to the very last people in the world you wanted to be exposed to. Screw it. I'm going to kiss this guy because I don't know what to do. I don't want this guy to think I like him, so I'm going to kiss the other guy.
Movie musings.
So in this movie, she writes these love letters. It was kind of her therapeutic way of getting her feelings out. Do you yourself keep any kind of sort of journal or diary or anything like that?
I cannot say I do. I confide in my close friends is what I do. I tried keeping a journal. I tried keeping a journal of experiences and times I had in university. I began that in September of 2020 as I was sitting in my international hotel quarantine, or not hotel quarantine, in my quarantine in my dorm room. I made one entry and never touched it again. However, what I have learned is that I enjoy taking pictures of experiences that I've had that I appreciate. And when I look at the pictures, it transports me back to those moments and it awakens memories I didn't remember that I had. And so I take a lot more pictures than I did when I was in high school, which is fun for me, especially, when they're in, interesting places that I had forgotten that I'd gone to, or, random nights that I'd forgotten that I'd had or whatever. So yeah. I guess you could say I keep a photo journal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's definitely, now it's so much easier because on the other side of things, we were talking about how, she gets bullied on social media, but also like for Whitney and I, we have like time hop. And so you get every day we get a push notification and it's all the moments that have happened in the past. And so it is pretty cool. Like, I think in some regards, it'll be a little weird for our girls to grow up and just almost they could probably almost document how they looked every day of their lives, which is kind of in one way kind of neat, but then also kind of creepy in the same regard. But you saying that, like, It's fine. I've never kept a journal or anything like that. I honestly, mentally for me, no surprise, I connect a lot of moments with movies and even I can uh, I tie it to I usually can remember who I've seen a movie with in the theater and that sort of thing. But you saying that reminded me of a story. My freshman year in college, I had a group of friends, and we decided to basically make a time capsule of sorts. And we wrote letters to ourselves, and we said we would go back our senior year and dig it up or whatever like that. And I think we maybe had put a couple of little moment little trinkets in there too or whatever. And so anyway, we buried it for all my Baylor friends out there. We buried it right behind this window in Colin's dorm, which was the girls' dorm on Baylor's campus at the time. And when we go back our senior year, they have basically essentially built a brick wall around where we had dug it. And also we weren't smart enough either to really mark where where we had dug this thing. So we of course have to I think we knocked on the girl's window where it reside. She opened the window and she let it snuck us in to go through the back window into the courtyard where the time capsule was. And but we did get it out, but we ultimately got busted too. But reading that letter for even though it had only been 4 years, kind of what I wrote to myself my freshman year, it was pretty entertaining. So I think it's okay. Good question here. I'm interested in how you answer this one. Well, especially you kind of made reference. You kind of like darker movies, but they pose this question in this movie of what's your favorite John Hughes movie?
Right. So I couldn't tell you who that is.
I figure that might be the answer. So yeah. So this is how this movie brought in my generation by having such a discussion about John Hughes movies. So yeah, they talk about 16 Candles, but he did the Breakfast Club, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He didn't direct Home Alone, but he was one of the producers and writers of that movie. So yeah. So the other movie they did discuss that Peter talks about is Fight Club. Have you seen Fight Club?
I am embarrassed to tell you that I have not, and my girlfriend Charlotte Capers will. I know she's cringing right now, which is in line with the theme of this podcast and this movie. But yeah, no, have not seen Fight Club, although it's been on my list to watch for years.
Okay, yeah.
I know Rule 1 of Fight Club, which is you don't talk about Fight Club, but
right, exactly. No, it is definitely a movie I loved when it came out. It is definitely part of that, probably what made it a cult hit. Now, I haven't seen it in a long time, and I know a lot of people talked about that movie recently because a lot of the themes that basically, for lack of better words, white privileged men who feel this angst out, in our society. It's actually the moment when it came out, it kind of seemed extreme. Now not so much so it almost kind of forecasted a lot of behavior that at the time seemed a little crazy and now not so much. But yeah. So was now you don't have to get into specifics here, but could you ever connect? Was there ever a really good friend that you had that you ever wanted to be more than friends with? Did you connect with her feelings towards Josh? Did you ever have a relationship like that?
My current girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
We okay, CC. Well, enjoy that I'm rehashing this now. Yeah, no, we met at the Conference on National Affairs, which is, essentially the sort of Uber youth and government program, which is what both myself and Charlotte Capers did. And we were in the same first committee. And I met her, and she was extraordinarily smart and knew what she was talking about, and clearly kind of dominated the room, which I was like, oh, wow, she's really cool. I really like her. One thing led to another. I wore lederhosen at the dance, and there's many glorious pictures of that. And somehow we became friends, and then began 3.5 years of friendship. Most of those where I was like, I would love to be more than friends. And here we are now. So yeah, I have a lot of experience with that actually.
was was that when you finally expressed put your feelings out there? Uh, how frightening was that, or were you nervous about that?
It was some. I was very nervous about it. It felt very natural, but at the same time, I was yeah. I was very nervous about it, and yeah. It felt a bit. It felt like I was crossing the Rubicon there. Uh, yeah.
As I mentioned earlier in the quote, you got to tell people how you feel when you feel it. You did it, and it paid off.
Well, I didn't tell her how I felt when I felt it. I felt it, or I told her after about 3.5 years. But you know what? That's life.
Hey, better late than never.
Rom-com rankings.
So the first category is the romantic chemistry between the leads. So
Yeah.
what do you give Laura Jean and Peter here?
Oh, I've got to give it a solid 4, or even a 4.5 out of 5, maybe even a 5. I think a lot of it boils down to the fact that the leads themselves liked each other as people. I looked it up on IMDb. Apparently, some of the posters in Laura Jean's room are actually of the cast enjoying themselves and hanging out on set in their off time, because they just genuinely had interpersonal chemistry, which I really appreciated. I think it bled through into the movie. So
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I gave the relationship 4 hearts. Um, I thought they did you really do get to see them grow as characters. And going off what you just said, I think I read that at one point you see her screensaver and it's the two of them or whatever. Apparently that picture was actually them just hanging out off a set, and like one of the producers took it, and so they decided to use it for the screensaver. Yeah. Now I've said in past podcasts that this part of what my higher ranking is because of how I see them, if I still see them together in the future. Now, this being a teen romance, and I don't know if this is a spoiler, whatever. In the sequels, are they always together, or does it last?
So in the second movie, John Ambrose, my Model UN king, shows up. I thought there was a little bit of a wrench in things, but in the end, they get back together. And then,
Okay.
and the third movie, which I have not watched, but I've read the synopsis of, it involves them going off to college on opposite coasts and them not knowing if they should be together, but in the end, they decide to be together, which I do relate to.
Okay, well there you go. Oh, I think that verifies our rankings there. The second category I have is the best friend. So I thought you could, this sometimes kind of leans more into like other supporting characters. I like to go off what the guest feels like. I think two people might be the best friend character here. She definitely has Christine, who is her buddy in this movie, and then also Kitty, her younger sister. Those were kind of the two that I saw.
Yeah.
Was there somebody else that you thought fit that category?
Nah, I really think that it's Kitty takes the cake here. Chris is not in the movie a huge amount, and
Right.
there's a good emphasis on the sisterly and family bonds, which are very strong in Laura Jean's household. So, I mean, I think Kitty's the only game in town, really. I mean, I guess you could say the older sister, but she also doesn't feature in the movie because Laura Jean's scared to talk to her. So.
Yeah. Kitty's character remind me of 500 Days of Summer, which we watched not too long ago, and he has like this younger, wiser sister. It's almost like a character trope in these things that even though she's young, she's wise beyond her years. But yeah, I really did. I like the moments with Kitty in here. So framing that, like, what do you give Kitty as her character here?
I'm sad to say that I have to give her more like 3. And the problem with that is that I don't know that a 6th grader is that wise, because I too have been a 6th grader. I was not a wise 6th grader, certainly not in the realm of like social relationships, in which you have no experience as a 6th grader. You're just sort of spitballing, and it's like Kitty. as a character. When I suspended my disbelief, love her, but just like as a character, I'm like, really? You're that wise?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I gave her 3 as well. I like you. I really like her character. I think she kills the scenes that she's in. Still kind of question why she just put all those letters in the mail, but she provides a lot of comedic beats. She's definitely memorable, and I think that showcases in the fact that they're doing this TV series just based on her character. So yeah, I think I think you hit it on the nail there. Okay, as far as the soundtrack, now this one might be a little hard because being in this era and this movie coming out on Netflix exclusively, back in my day when the soundtracks were like big sellers. So basically, there was not like an official soundtrack for this movie. I found a playlist on Spotify that seemed to pull a lot of the songs, so that's what I listened to. I don't know. Did you have a chance to listen to the soundtrack?
I literally, as you were saying that, I was making a very confused face because I was not aware that there was a soundtrack to this movie.
Okay. Well, it's fair. We've done it before, like kind of in I'll say for the real quick, just on the soundtrack, at least the playlist I listened to, and I quickly looked, it seemed to match a lot of the songs that were like in the end credits. I actually was a little surprised how much I like this music. A lot of people say, the music you always end up loving is kind of when you were a teenager and stuff. That's kind of still the music that you listen to, even when you're, you think of like the music your parents probably still listen to. It's probably when they were like in high school and college. So that's it. So a lot of the songs I did not know, but I was surprised how much I enjoyed it. So I gave it 3.5. Not all of them worked for me, but as I listened to it, there was actually a couple of songs that I hearted on Spotify that like put it on your kind of light songs. So that surprised me. So I give it 3.5. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody was like ranked it much higher who maybe, grew up with these artists and stuff. So I think it's definitely worth listening to. It didn't ostracize me as much as I thought it might have. So
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. So the fourth category I have is the chase scene or the declaration of love.
Nice.
That moment. And so I think you can definitely say it's pretty much the end of this movie where she finds Peter at the lacrosse field, who he's like totally by himself. And there's no other equipment to be seen.
Yes, convenient.
Yeah. So what would you rank this moment?
Oh, there's a certain catharsis to it, man. I don't know, 3.5.
Okay.
4. I mean, there's a little bit of I'm like, kind of like you. I was like, okay, he's on the lacrosse scene alone. This is quite obviously a parallel of one of those opening scenes, but at the same time, there is that catharsis moment, and you know that it's about to happen. I mean, I appreciate that it parallels to a degree the very opening scene where she's imagining herself walking across a field of like sunflowers or something, kissing, Josh, and like the lighting is the exact same or almost the exact same, it seems like. So
yeah,
3.5, verging on 4.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I gave it 3. I felt like it was kind of weak in the moment. Like you, I see the tie back to all these kind of romance stories that she liked to engulf in and everything. But yeah, it just kind of I felt like it wrapped things up really, really fast. All of a sudden, I was like, okay, now the movie's over. So yeah. But I mean, I think there could be worse, but it's not really what I remember most about this movie. Okay, so the last category is rewatchability. What would you give this?
Having rewatched it for this specific podcast, a solid. I would give it a 3.5 again, because there's certain moments where certain things happen in the background, like you see in the confrontation scene on Christmas when everything goes kaput. You see Josh walk up. You see like his shadow walking across the screen before they cut back to Peter, and then cut to Josh saying, "She told you to go away," or whatever. So to an extent, you start to see certain things that you didn't see before. which is, to this movie's credit, they probably made it with that sort of rewatchability idea in mind. That said, I don't know. To an extent, it's a comfort movie, but I have many others that are cringier and a little bit cringier that I will go to as a comfort movie before to all the ones I've loved before.
Yeah. I gave this a solid 3. As I mentioned earlier, it was a movie I'd seen before. And the fact that I couldn't remember anything about it really going into this kind of, reflects that. But I will also say I thought I was surprised that I enjoyed this movie when I kind of saw that this one was on the list. I was kind of like, why is that on the list? I could see the argument for it. For sure. And so definitely, I mean, it was in the moment. Still, there's some things maybe where I don't quite want Hallie to watch it yet, but I thought that I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely a movie I would recommend to people, especially if they're looking for something to just kind of kick back and enjoy and not think too much about it. But now I'm mad though, because I watched it on Netflix and now all I'm getting is like advertisements for all the other movies. So yeah. I don't, as much as I like this movie, I don't really have a desire to see the other installments.
Recommendations.
For our recommendations section, is there anything that you're watching or listening to or reading that you think people should check out?
Yes. You suggested that it could include music. That was a mistake. That was a mistake, my friend. Because I've been listening to a lot of 80s Euro pop.
Okay.
Which I acknowledge is a very American expat thing to say. But my God, man, it's on another level. There is a song called Chai, spelled CHI, like the latte, chai tea latte. That was at 1982 Eurovision. That almost won, that I listen to very regularly.
Okay.
There's also an Italian band called Ricky E. Poveri with a song called Mamma Maria, which is a perfect introduction to their work that I listen to quite literally every day, sometimes in the library while I'm reading about the Ethiopian civil war in Tigray, which is a very interesting juxtaposition, but it's one that I make work. So yeah, no, Euro pop, man. Once you pop, you can't stop.
That's funny. You saying 80s music, I do want to shout out. I mentioned the soundtrack. I do. One of my favorite songs of all time, I've just always loved it, is Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears. And that's a song that her dad plays on the radio in the cafe, the song that he says, her mom danced to all the time. I've always loved that song. Like one of my favorites songs to run to, actually. And the fact that this movie used that song, like, yeah, good, big kudos to them about that. Yeah, I want to suggest, we just started the second season of it. It just came out on Apple TV, but Schmigadoon, which is basically a spoof on musicals. So the first season, this couple who's kind of at odds end up in this kind of magical land of they're in a musical, and the first season was on a Oklahoma type-esque musical, bright colors and stuff like that. It's now, if you don't like musicals, you won't like the show, but if you love musicals, you'll love it. The songs themselves are hilarious, but also very well done. The choreography is amazing. It's an all-star cast. You'll recognize tons of people from it. But the second season that just started is a spoof off of the darker musicals of those like Chicago and like Fosse type of things. And so I love that they just have gone a different direction in musicals, And so anyway, I've been enjoying it so far. But once again, I want to front, if you don't like musicals, you won't like this show, but if you do, you'll love it. So that's my recommendation. Yeah. So, well, next week we're actually going to take a break from the rom-coms list and talk about one of my favorite movies from a set of one of my favorite directors. We're going to talk about The Big Lebowski, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Are you a Coen Brothers Coen Brothers fan?
Yeah, I got to be honest. Haven't seen that movie.
Okay. Have you seen any
Looking up-
Coen Brothers films?
It is very likely that I have. However, one step is getting to watch a movie. The other step is getting me to remember who made the movie. So,
Okay.
you know, why don't I look them up? Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? I love that movie.
Yeah. Fargo.
I've seen that one.
Raising Arizona. No Country for Old Men. Anyway, they're one of my all-time favorite directors, and one of my friends posted about this movie celebrating its 25th anniversary. It's actually going to be released in select theaters, I think April 16th weekend, and so I thought it'd be a good time to kind of revisit that movie, take a little break from this list. So anyway, that should be a fun discussion. As always, check out moviesourlife.com for episodes, reviews, and more. Please rate and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms. If you're listening on Spotify right now or even Apple, stop right now. It won't take but a second and give us a high rating. This helps us grow our audience and gain more listeners. I wanted to thank you again, Cameron, for coming on and working through the time difference here and finally getting to connect and talk about this movie.
Yes, well, thank you for having me on again. I see I did not scare you away too much when we discussed Gandhi. It is 11:10 at the moment, so yeah, huzzah.
Yeah, and I feel like I should promise you that next time we will talk about a very dark movie.
Huzzah. Huzzah. I'll ask you, Nathan, I will ask you so many philosophical questions and ethical questions. You'll want to tear your hair out as much as I want to tear my hair out on a regular basis.
Well, I need that challenge. I still, at my age, I still have my hair, so maybe I should be wary of that. But anyway, well, thanks again, everyone, for listening, and have a great week.